Thank you so much for taking the time to tune into today's podcast episode of Empowered in Health. I am so excited to have Michelle Choairy here. She is a mom that I connected with actually through our business mentorship this summer, and we both have medically complex kiddos. And so today we're going to talk a little bit heart to heart about our experience. We're going to share a little bit about Michelle's brand, what she's building, how she's serving mothers specifically of kids that have medically complex concerns. And we're going to dive deeper and just talk about our experiences and share our hearts. So Michelle, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so grateful for you.
Oh my gosh, we've been waiting for this for months, Erin, and we finally connected. So I'm loving this. I'm glad that we finally found the time. But yes, here we are, mamas of our complex kids. So
yeah, here we are. Michelle, I'd love to start with you just kind of giving a little bit of background story on you, a little bit of who you are, what you're about, and what you're starting to build inside your personal brand and the mission that you're creating.
Sure. So I have a 10-year-old son he's my complex kid. And I came up with the complex kid idea because I didn't want to differentiate diagnoses, because when you have a complex kid, if you say I have a complex kid and a mom looks at you, and if you have one, the mom says I do too, and there's no differentiating, there's no reason to even go there. We just know we have complex kids, right? So my son, we started very young. He was in the NICU for a month. He was really premature. And we've had issues through the years, through 10 years, and developmental delays, speech delays. My gosh, can we name them all? I don't know, because I can go down all the 15 diagnoses that my kid has, right? But the biggest thing was that back in 2008, well, not 2008, he wasn't even born, back 2 years ago. In 2022, we actually figured out that he has a genetic disorder that's called TBR1. And back then, he was one out of 70 kids. Now, today, he's a one out of 200 in the world, not just in the US, in the world. So it's a very rare genetic disorder, and we don't know much about it. But because of all of these things that I have had to deal with for the past 10 years, I decided that I was going to help the mamas like us become their kids' advocate. I feel like there's a need for that, because the majority of the moms that have these complex kids, they just they don't know where to go. They're so lost, right, Erin? Like,
so lost.
Yeah. So I started what's called Collective Wisdom for Complex Kids. And so I've been doing this for a few months, and it's been fun being able to help these moms, because you see the changes that I am helping them make in their lives and the lives of their children. So that's kind of the background, and that's how we met, because we were kind of involved that way. But, all I want to do these days is help these mamas like you, like me, and like, so many others out there. We have to be their advocate. So this is what I'm trying to do.
I love it. And it's so important. As you said, you hit the nail on the head. And it's interesting because you and I have this commonality where we have a medically complex child, and you are really working hard to create a safe place for women to feel heard, seen, supported, guided, like they're not going crazy for not understanding what's going on. And there's so many parallels to that, even in the work that I'm doing too. So I'm focused more on health and wellness and really empowering moms to also advocate for themselves while they're advocating for their children. And it's the same vibe, right? Moms to feel seen, heard, loved, included, like they're not going crazy based on how they might personally be feeling. Having these safe spaces created for women is just so imperative in order to support us in our day-to-day life. And I love that you're doing this, Michelle, because I know firsthand how much women need this overall, and especially moms who have a medically complex kid who want to have more support.
Yeah. One of the things that I always say, like, it's so isolating, right? I remember going through periods of my life where we couldn't go to a restaurant I couldn't
Yeah.
take my son to a restaurant because there was going to be a meltdown, or
Yeah.
because we had to walk him because he couldn't sit down because of his ADHD. And
Yeah.
so we would literally, like my husband and I, we would go to dinner with his family, and I would get up and I would walk my son, and then my husband would come back, and I would come back, and then my husband would take him so we could eat. We would eat at different times.
Yeah.
So the isolation that happens when you have a child like this, or any kind of, when you're talking about your side of things, like if you have depression or if you have anything related, it's an isolating thing. And you cannot let that keep going. Like that
Right.
is the biggest thing. Everybody needs a village. And in this business that I am doing right now, that is the biggest thing. You need a village, and you need to create that team, that people who are going to help you and your child, so you can be the best parent for your child. If you're not
Yeah.
well, your child's not going to be well. So,
Yes. Oh my gosh, so much truth to that. I would love for you to talk a little more about just the support in your community. Like if there's a mom listening to this that has a medically complex kid or feels very isolated in her life based on a diagnosis or based on a situation that she might be managing in her home, what does coming into your community look like? What does the support look like? What are you usually working with your moms through and how does that work? I would love to hear more of that.
yeah, so I created a Facebook group because I think that social media, love, hate, whatever you want to call it, but I still feel like that is where you can meet with other people, right? And have that community. So we have a Facebook group. It's called Thrive, and it's for neurodivergent kids and whatever you want to call it, complex, neurodivergent, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter.
Right.
Just come in, because all the mamas in there think that they're crazy, and they're melting down, and they don't know what they're doing, and they're failing as parents. So if
Yeah.
that's how you feel, join us, because we're all trying to get on that train to get to a better place.
Yeah.
So that is what we're doing. So what I do in there, I do some weekly trainings, just going over different things that are related to the program that I have. So when you have a complex kid, you have to go through certain steps on how to make your child better. And there's 6 steps to this. It's called Thrive.
Yeah.
And the first thing is teamwork. And that's where the village comes in, right? You have to have that. So, and there's lots of other things, but every week we touch in one point or another. We talk about special education. We talk about IEPs. We talk about 504s, like we were talking earlier. We talk
Yeah.
about state funded programs. We talk about how to keep a marriage going when you are so involved into your child's therapies and health and well-being, and you forget about your husband and the other kids. So,
Yeah.
like, we talk about all of those things. So, every week we do that. And then, of course, if they want to talk to me personally, we have the one on one, and we have group coaching. I have resources for people, and all of that is in that, in that community and part of this whole program.
I love that. And it's just I know that I haven't had the chance to step into the community yet, but we did talk about that. But I love
Yes.
that you have a variety of different resources, and I love that you're even going as deep as talking about your relationships, talking about your marriage. I know before we dove into recording today, one of the things I was sharing with you was how my husband and I right now are switching off sleeping with our son because we're still managing nocturnal seizures overnight, which are very scary for us because there are nights when he turns blue, he stops breathing, he seemingly looks like he's going to choke himself. Like there's some really hard moments in the season we're in right now, and it's absolutely affected our marriage and our relationship. And it's absolutely affected our entire family dynamic because we have this one specific kiddo that needs more support, needs more intervention, needs more medical attention at this point in time. And part of the other side of the coin is starting to get some self-awareness around how is this also affecting the other dynamics in the family, including your marriage. And so I love that you have that as a level of support for the women that come in, because it's just something that we need to normalize and
Yeah.
feel like we can safely and openly speak about those kinds of things in our life. Because to your point, when we're sitting in isolation, we feel like we're the only ones. We feel like, how are we ever going to be able to manage this and get through to where we need to in order to get to this place where we feel like we're thriving? So, Michelle, I'd love for you to maybe share a little bit more about when you're talking about something like taking care of your marriage, or you're talking about how does this affect the other people in your family or the other kids in your family. What are the tips, tricks, and tools you're talking to your moms about? And what does that look like?
Sure. Honestly, that's on top of having a complex kid, dealing with your family is probably one of the hardest parts of this, right?
Yeah.
Because it is a daily thing. Like, you are at home, you have a husband, you might have other children, you might not, but you still have the extended family that's still involved. And one of the things that I found in the beginning that really I talk to people a lot is how the outside world views your family and how that comes into play. Because for years, Erin, for years, all I heard from my in-laws and from other families and from other friends was that, oh, don't worry about it. He's going to be fine. So and so didn't speak until he was 5 or 6, and it's fine, and everything's going to be okay. And so you get all of that. And so there's that internal battle. So there is that part, the outside family, right? So you have to deal with that too. But then when you're talking daily with your husband and with your children, I have a 10-year-old, he's my complex kid, and I have a 7-year-old who's neurotypical. She's 7 going on 16,
Yeah.
and it is incredible, like, how she is. Anyway, but we really had to spend time explaining to her, hey, everybody's brains are different, and Drake's brain is different.
Mhm.
Or brain is different. Different people are different. They have different brains. And so we had to kind of explain to her in a way how they are different, why he goes to a different school than she does. And these things need to be talked about because they need to understand how it is. It's not that my son wants to have meltdowns. It's not that my son wants to destroy things. A lot of times it's that sensory thing. And you have to use words that your other children are going to understand. Now, when it
Yeah.
comes to your husbands, right? My gosh,
It's a
let me
hard
tell
one.
you, I don't know. I look at the statistics that come with the parents with complex kids, and it's alarming what happens. It is like about 40 to 45% divorce happens when you have a complex child, when you have a child with a disability. And it's
Yeah.
because we forget that we're married, and that is how we started the family. And you have different views. You do. And everybody's entitled to different views and different situations, and to think of whatever in different ways. The most important thing is that somehow you got to sit down, and there's got to be emotional intelligence. And
Yeah.
I love using this word because it is really hard with some of the dads to find that emotional intelligence. And so to understand that, hey, we're here and we need to have this conversation, not just for you and me, but this is for our children. And that takes time to find that intelligence, to find that emotional state where you can have that conversation. And it might not happen in the beginning when things are just chaotic, when, that's not going to happen. And one other thing that I always tell my parents is that, my moms, is that if your husband, your significant other, is willing to do some therapy sessions, please do them. You have to take care of your mental health, your husband's mental health, so you can take care of your kiddos' mental health.
Yep.
So, I like to use when you get in the airplane and they're talking about oxygen mask, you got to put your
Yep.
oxygen mask on before you put it on your children, because if you die, you can't put it on their. So you got
Right.
to do things before you do it for your kids. And
Right.
so just do it,
Yeah.
but it's hard. Not
It is
saying that
hard.
it's,
The emotional intelligence component is so key. I love that you spoke on that because that has been, really something that we've had to get grounded in our own relationship, my husband and I. And I'm sure you've also learned that firsthand in your own experience. And when I hear you say that, I hear also this level of really working to this place of deep rooted acceptance and deep rooted grace. Because one of the things we've had to emotionally kind of wrap our heads around is this concept of how this isn't exactly how we pictured our life to be. This is not exactly what we prayed for when we thought of our big family and we thought about our future and we thought about how things were going to go. So there has been a lot of grief inside of our own journey that we've had to be really honest about. And we've had to really open up emotionally about how this isn't necessarily exactly what I envisioned, and being okay with saying that and normalizing that discussion, because it has made a massive difference in our ability to really communicate through what has truly transpired in our experience and how do we normalize some of the feelings that feel hard, because we're human, and it's okay to say things like that. Like, this isn't exactly what I had envisioned, but I'm also grateful for what I'm learning along the way and getting to this place of acceptance and embracing, the experience that we are going through. So I love that you have that as a topic of conversation inside your groups for your moms, Michelle, because it is extremely hard and very heavy, and it can be so uncomfortable. And to have safe places and community groups where you can do that work alongside others that understand and can be empathetic through it is so game changing. So I love that you have that for your moms.
yeah.
It's
It is so important. It is so important. And in talking in going back to what you were talking about, we for in the beginning, do we want to hear that our child has issues? We don't. Do we want to hear that they're complex, that they have? Hey, no, we don't. When we get pregnant, right? And we're going to have this child, I don't know if I necessarily saw what his life was going to be, in 20 years or whatever. But I know my husband wanted him to be an NFL player or an NBA player, or, you know what I mean? Like, he's a huge
yeah,
sports fan. So I knew that he wanted sports to be a part of his life. And we had to accept, it's exactly what you said. Acceptance is the word. We had to accept the fact that he's not going to be that. But you know what? He can feel emotions from other people like nobody else I know. He, you can come home, and if you've had a bad day, he can feel it and he comes to you and he's going to try to make you feel better. I don't
yeah,
know what that is, but they have their good things that they do too. They
yeah,
have who they are and who they become, and you are a big part of that. And
yeah,
so when you are not accepting what they are and who they are, how are they expected to accept themselves and be
yeah,
who they are and
yeah,
what they're going to be?
yeah, exactly right. That's such an important reminder, and something that admittedly my husband and I have had to work through, because again, when you have this expectation and then the reality isn't lining up with the expectation, there's just some grief in that. And I've had
Yeah.
that experience with all of my kiddos, but
Mm-hmm.
especially with my son, especially with our medically complex son, because there's just adversity that I didn't anticipate. There's levels of diagnoses that I didn't anticipate. There's therapies and interventions and medications and protocols and so many things I did not anticipate. And so for me, it's been really getting into this deep rooted place of faith and knowing that this
Mm-hmm.
is exactly who we are, and that's absolutely okay, and this is who our family is, and this is the dynamic of our family, and that's absolutely okay, and it's a gift. And being in this place of fully accepting and loving that has been such a freeing experience for us. But I can
Mhm.
confidently tell you, I have not been able to get to that place alone. I've had to do a lot of therapy. I've had to be in community groups and places where I felt supported, seen, heard, and loved. And that's why I love what you're doing, Michelle, because we need that. We cannot do that inside out work and get into that really deep emotional intelligence place without support, without people that see us and kind of affirm how we're feeling as we're going through these different levels of the process and the journey of walking alongside our medically complex kids. So I'm just grateful for you, Michelle. Yeah,
We need a
so great.
village, Erin.
We need
We
a
need a
village.
village. We need a
We,
village. It takes a village.
it takes a village for sure. I'd love for you to maybe talk. I know you've been on a podcast tour recently. You're doing more talks and sharing your story and sharing about your work. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about really your heart around what you've been sharing on different podcasts and in the speeches that you're doing. What has been the biggest message that you want to share with people, and what's on your heart related to your mission that you want to share more about today?
Oh my gosh, I think that the biggest thing is to make sure that mamas out there, they know that they're not alone. I see this on a daily basis on social media, on anywhere really, like moms who do not have the community. And so I think that bringing awareness to that, and also to people who don't necessarily have complex kids, but they are around people who do have complex kids, teaching them to understand that it's not bad parenting. It's not, it's not something that the parents are choosing to do,
Right.
but it is what it is. It is what it
Yeah.
is. And if you want to be a support to those people, you need to understand what it is. So bring an awareness out there to them, and also to moms, to understand that they're not alone. And it has been so fun talking to people who, some of them understand exactly what I'm coming from, like you, Erin. Like, we're having this conversation in a podcast where, you understand you have a child who is a complex kid. But other
Yeah.
people, they have no idea what that is. And they are
Yeah.
so interested in knowing and understanding what my life has been. And really, it's been great to translate what we deal with to people
Mhm.
who are like, they don't have a complex kid, but they still need to do all these things that we're doing for ourselves, right?
Yes.
I love these mamas, and I just want to make sure that they all feel how much they are loved. They're not alone, and there are other people out there that are willing to help you and help you make that village. That is what I'm trying to do, and it's been fun doing that, and I love it. And mamas, you're going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay
Everything is going to be okay with a village, right? With a
with the
village.
village.
With a village. Michelle, one question I want to ask you before we wrap up. This is something that I ask everyone that comes on the podcast. I usually ask two different questions. The first is, when it comes to the topic of mental health, which is something that I'm also extremely passionate about, just like you, why do you feel like, especially for moms, it's so important to speak about the importance of nurturing your mental health and getting resources and creating a village or going to therapy? Why do you, again, feel like speaking and normalizing through our mental health components and taking care of that matters for the motherhood community?
Oh my gosh, mamas, if you're not well, nobody else will be well in your family.
Yeah. Yes.
Just trust me. So
Yeah.
that is why it's
Yeah.
not about you. If you
Yeah.
can't do it for yourself, you got to do it for your family, and you got to do
Yeah.
it for your kids. It's not about
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And it's so true. Like, what we do as far as taking care of our wellness trickles into every other aspect of our life. And sometimes it does take that mindset of saying, I need to also really make sure I'm doing this for the people around me that I care about. And I know for me, in some of my harder moments, that was one of the things that helped kind of push me over into this place of continuing to get more support, knowing that I needed to make sure that I was in a place that felt good so I could show up for the people that I love. So I love that as a reminder. Michelle, last question, and then we'll kind of wrap up. What to you is a favorite quote or a favorite mantra or something that you can say to yourself or think about that reminds you to take care of yourself, that reminds you that your mental health matters, that reminds you of the importance of pouring into advocating not only for your son's need and your family's needs, but also yourself. I'd love to hear what your perspective is.
So I've never been asked that question, but the very first thing that came to mind was, you're not alone.
Yeah.
And the reason I love that is because I understand that it's not just me,
Yeah.
and that it takes a village. We've talked about this multiple times,
Yep.
but it takes a village. I'm not alone. And there are other people going out there going through the same things that I am. And the more
Yeah.
you talk about it, the better you're going to feel about it. That's why therapy works, right?
Yeah.
That's why therapy and having this community and doing all this stuff, that's why,
Yeah.
it works. So,
Yeah. I love
yeah.
that because again, when you get into that headspace and remember that and say that to yourself, it does put you in this place of feeling a little bit more encouraged to share, a little bit more encouraged to talk about your truth. Because to your point, the more we share, the more we're connected, and the more we're connected, the better we feel. The more we feel less alone. So, oh my gosh, so much
And
truth in
I have to put something out there because it's been in my mind for the past minute, and I just need to say it. So before this podcast, Erin and I sat down, and she was like, "Let's talk about your health, Michelle," because she's so good about this. And I'm like, I have been so crappy, and here we are. Right? There's a reason for these things. We talked about meeting today. We finally made it work, and you are helping me.
Yeah.
So this is awesome.
Yeah.
Village
Yeah.
people, village.
Yes. Village. And to Michelle's point, we all need some level of support in our lives. There's things that we maybe do well, and there's things that we just maybe need a little bit more help and support with. I mean, this is something that we talk about and normalize in our household all the time. We talk to our medically complex son about it all the time because he is always asking questions about, why do I need these medications? Why do I have to go to these specific appointments or do these deeper dive things? And we're always talking to him about that there's things in our lives that we need more support with. And this, for you and your specific situation, this is where your body and your brain need a little more support. And then I tell him very openly, like, this is where mommy needs more support. I also go to therapy and I also do these things to make sure that my body feels strong and healthy. And these are the things I do to make sure that I can show up for you and for your siblings and for your dad and all the things when it comes to advocating for our family. And so I love that you are just continuing to share those important nuggets of inspiration, Michelle. It's so incredible, and I'm so grateful for you. I have loved connecting. I love having you in my village, especially as moms of medically complex kids, because you're absolutely right. We cannot do it alone. We cannot do it alone. Michelle,
No.
before we kind of wrap up today, will you quickly just share how people can find you online, how they can get connected to you? If someone wants to learn more about being a part of your community, where can they find you?
Yeah. So they can find me as Michelle Choairy. My business is called Wisdom Number Four Complex Kids. So Wisdom Number Four Complex Kids. That's my website. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, either my name, Michelle Choairy, or Wisdom Number Four Complex Kids. So,
Awesome. And
and
we'll
I
make
would
sure.
love to connect. So come on over, talk to me. Let's chat how I can help, because I love doing this.
I love it. And we'll make sure that everything for Michelle's contacts are listed out in the show notes of this podcast. If you ever have questions about how to get connected to either of us, feel free to reach out online or via the information in the podcast show notes. So grateful for you, Michelle. Really, really appreciate your perspective and your time today. Talk to you soon.
Thanks